The elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor, and Marcus Chen stepped into the marble lobby of Chen Technologies, briefcase in hand, mind already racing through the morning's acquisition meetings. He didn't notice the elderly man in the gray maintenance uniform carefully polishing the brass fixtures near the executive suite. He never did. For 15 years, James Walker had been invisible in this building. He arrived before dawn, left after dark, and in between, he cleaned what others dirtied, fixed what others broke, and smiled at people who looked through him as if he were made of glass. At 67, his hands were weathered and his back often ached, but his eyes still held a spark that no amount of thankless work could extinguish. That spark came from the one thing that had sustained him through decades of struggle: music. Marcus was a different kind of man now than he'd been when he started this company in his garage 20 years ago. Success had a way of building walls around people, and his were particularly high. His wife, Victoria, had noticed. Their daughter, Lily, definitely had. At 19, she'd come home from Juilliard for winter break with fire in her eyes and disappointment in her voice. "You've forgotten what matters, Dad," she'd said over dinner the night before. "You've forgotten how to be human." The words stung because they were true. He'd missed her last 3 recitals. He couldn't remember the last time he'd really talked to Victoria about anything other than schedules and obligations. He'd built an empire, but somehow lost sight of why he'd wanted to build it in the first place. That morning, Marcus was distracted, reviewing notes on his phone as he walked toward his office. He didn't see the wet floor sign. His Italian leather shoe hit the freshly mopped tile, and suddenly the world tilted. His briefcase flew from his hand, papers scattering like startled birds, and he landed hard on his side, pain shooting through his ribs and arm. "Mr. Chen!" James was beside him in seconds, strong hands steadying him. "Don't move too quick, sir." "Let me help you." Marcus winced, feeling foolish and angry, mostly at himself. "I'm fine. I just need to—" But when he tried to stand, his ankle buckled beneath him. "Easy now." James's voice was gentle but firm. "That ankle might be sprained. Let's get you sitting down properly." With surprising strength, he helped Marcus to a nearby chair, then quickly gathered the scattered papers, moving with practiced efficiency despite his age. Marcus watched him, really looked at him for perhaps the first time. The man's uniform bore a name tag, James Walker. His movements were careful, almost graceful, and when he handed back the briefcase, there was no trace of judgment in his eyes. Only genuine concern. "Thank you, James," Marcus said, the name feeling strange on his tongue because he'd never bothered to learn it before. "Of course, Mr. Chen. Should I call for medical?" No, I'll be fine." Marcus tested his ankle again, grimacing. "Just bruised ego, mostly." James smiled, and it transformed his weathered face. "Those heal faster than bones in my experience." Something made Marcus ask, "How long have you worked here, James?" 15 years this March, sir." 15 years. Marcus felt a flush of shame. "I should have known your name before today." "You know it now," James said simply, with no resentment. "That's what matters." The following week, Marcus found himself noticing James more often. The way he hummed softly while he worked, the care he took with every task, whether cleaning a window or replacing a light bulb. There was dignity in how he moved, something that spoke of a life lived with purpose, despite humble circumstances. Then came the executive holiday party. Marcus had nearly canceled it. He hated these forced social gatherings, but Victoria had insisted. "Your employees deserve to feel appreciated. Even if you don't feel like celebrating," she'd said. The event was held in the building's grand atrium, where a Steinway grand piano sat on a raised platform, more decoration than instrument. Most employees brought spouses or dates. Marcus noticed James had come alone, standing quietly near the back in his best shirt and tie, which had probably been best 20 years ago. Lily had come too, home for the holidays. She stood beside her father, watching the mingling crowd with an artist's observant eye. When the hired pianist took a break, she leaned close to Marcus. "Did you know that Janitor plays piano? The older gentleman by the refreshment table?" Marcus followed her gaze to James. "How would you know that?" "I've seen him in the practice rooms at Juilliard." He comes in late at night when the building's supposed to be closed, but the security guard lets him in. He plays Chopin like he's breathing. Her voice carried a note of awe. I've never heard anything like it outside of master recordings. Marcus stared at his daughter, then at James. Before he could second-guess himself, he was crossing the room. James, I wonder if you might do me a favor. The older man looked up, surprised. Of course, Mr. Chen, what do you need? My daughter tells me you play piano. Would you consider playing something for us? The pianist is on break and... Marcus paused, surprised by his own sincerity. I'd very much like to hear you play. Color rose in James's cheeks. Oh, I don't know, sir. I'm not really, these are important people and I'm just... You're James Walker, Marcus said firmly, and I'm asking you to share your gift, please. The room gradually quieted as James made his way to the piano. His hands trembled slightly as they hovered over the keys. Marcus saw his daughter watching with her musician's intensity, saw his employees exchanging curious glances, saw Victoria look at him with a question in her eyes. Then James began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Op. 9, number 2, floated through the atrium like prayers made audible. Within seconds, every conversation died. The room became a cathedral, and James became something more than a janitor in an old suit. His weathered hands moved across the keys with impossible grace, coaxing out phrases of such beauty that Marcus felt his throat tighten. This wasn't just technical proficiency, though the technique was flawless. This was music that carried the weight of a life lived, of dreams deferred but never abandoned, of beauty found and held close despite everything the world might take away. Each note held patience and longing, joy and sorrow intertwined like lovers who could not be separated. Marcus watched tears stream down his daughter's face. He saw his assistant, a young woman who always seemed stressed and harried, close her eyes and breathe deeply for perhaps the first time all evening. He saw grown men in expensive suits wipe their eyes, and he felt moisture on his own cheeks without shame. The music swelled and softened, each phrase a revelation. James played with his whole body, his whole heart, and in that moment, the barriers between people dissolved. The CEO and the janitor, the executive and the secretary, the wealthy and the struggling, all were simply humans, moved by beauty, unified by the language that needed no translation. When the final note faded, silence held the room for 3 heartbeats. Then applause erupted, genuine and thunderous. People were standing, some openly weeping, all transformed by what they'd witnessed. Marcus approached the piano where James sat, looking overwhelmed. That was extraordinary, Marcus said, his voice rough. Where did you learn to play like that? James smiled sadly. Juilliard, actually. Class of 78, got a full scholarship. He paused. But life had other plans. My mother got sick right after graduation, and the medical bills. Well, dreams are expensive, Mr. Chen. Family is more important. You gave up a concert career to care for your mother? I didn't give up anything, sir. I chose love. There's a difference. James's eyes were clear and certain. I've never regretted it. Music doesn't require a concert hall. It just requires listening. Marcus thought of his daughter, of her words about forgetting humanity. He thought of 15 years of walking past this man, of treating him as invisible, of letting success blind him to the extraordinary people who surrounded him every day. James, he said slowly, an idea forming. How would you feel about doing something different here? We have employee events, client gatherings, stress relief initiatives that never quite work. What if you became our cultural director? Plan musical events, maybe teach interested employees, perform regularly. Full position with benefits and a salary that reflects your actual worth to this company. James stared at him, then shook his head gently. Mr. Chen, that's incredibly kind, but I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's recognition. You've been enriching this space for 15 years in ways I was too blind to see. Let me rectify that blindness, please. Marcus surprised himself with the depth of his sincerity. Besides, my daughter will never forgive me if I let you go back to cleaning toilets when you could be sharing this gift with the world, or at least with this company. Lily had joined them, her eyes still bright with tears. He's right, Mr. Walker. That was transcendent. People need beauty like they need air, but we forget. You could remind us. James looked between father and daughter, at the crowd of people still watching with transformed faces, and slowly smiled. "If you're serious, Mr. Chen, then yes, I'd be honored." That night, Marcus drove home with Victoria and Lily, the city lights streaming past the car windows. "You did a good thing tonight," his wife said softly, taking his hand. "I did a small thing to correct years of being blind," Marcus replied. "There's a difference." Lily leaned forward from the back seat. "You heard him, though, Dad. You really heard him." "That's what matters." That's the start. She was right. The start. Because when James had played, Marcus hadn't just heard music. He'd heard a reminder that worth has nothing to do with titles or paychecks, that beauty exists in unexpected places, and that the people we overlook might be the very ones with the most to teach us. The next Monday, Marcus passed through the lobby and saw James, no longer in a maintenance uniform, but in dignified clothing that fit his new role. Their eyes met, and both men nodded, a recognition passing between them that went deeper than employer and employee. It was an acknowledgement of shared humanity, of second chances given and received, of the truth that we're all just people stumbling through life, looking for meaning and connection. "Good morning, James," Marcus said. "Good morning, Mr. Chen." And in that simple exchange, in that moment of mutual respect and recognition, both men understood that they'd each been given an unexpected gift. James had been seen, truly seen, for who he really was. And Marcus had been reminded that success without humanity is just noise. Impressive, perhaps, but ultimately empty. The real music, the kind that transforms lives, happens when we finally stop long enough to listen. Not just to notes played on a piano, but to the quiet dignity of people doing unglamorous work. To the dreams that persist despite circumstances. To the beauty that surrounds us when we open our eyes to truly see. Sometimes it takes a janitor playing Chopin to remind a CEO what it means to be human. And sometimes being reminded is exactly what we need to find our way home.